would love to share a warm welcome to those gathered.
Recording in progress.
I think that's because you're in here twice, Bobby. No?
I'll see if
He's
there's
let me remove the other one.
Oh, he's dropped out himself.
Oh,
is
okay.
this,
Oh, there we
is
go.
this right now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Because it had me waiting in the waiting room, I guess, in the Zoom secondary.
When I closed the waiting room and admitted everyone, it probably caused a problem.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that would accordingly.
No, you're good.
While folks are arriving, I just wanted to warmly welcome Peter Wells. Hello there. And
Hi,
Hey,
Peter.
Bobby, it's great to see you all.
wonderful
Nice
to
to
be
see
able
you.
to be here, and thank you so much for making this possible. And very warm welcome to the others gathered. Hello, Jonathan Langdon. Hello, Dave Witzel. Hello, this is T.O. and looking forward to our session today.
Nice.
Nice.
So
nice
good to see you. Oh, we have a few more people coming in. We have 20 people responded that they were going to come, so we might have to wait a little bit. Not that we're expecting. Sorry.
Yeah, because these sessions are so short, we can just go ahead and get started, and then people can come and go as they please. The waiting room is disabled, so people can just hop right in.
Okay.
Terrific. So in the spirit of time, I'm going to get us to begin. Thank you so much for joining us here today for this session we have on how positive deviance can allow us to reach the future that we most want to occur. I'm Bobby Fishkin, and very brief background is I co-lead Crowd Doing, and I've also convened community around working backwards from a Solarpunk future. And I have been sense making around what are all the dimensions of a future we'd most wish to occur in the future through the proofs of concept that we have in the lived experience of the world that we have collective memory of. And positive deviance is a pathway to that we'll be looking forward to exploring today. I believe that systems change can weave positive deviant examples into an alternative future that is a future that we would love to get to. So in that spirit, I'm going to then hand over to Mark Smith, who, along with Saskia and I, will be co-hosting today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Bobby. You know, it's funny. I every once in a while, how did I get here? How did this happen that I'm sitting here with you all? And it comes from meeting Bobby and over the last year and learning what the term as a scientific kind of study, positive deviance was, and me being who I am and the journey that I've been on for the last 40 years of looking for my leprechaun kin, which comes from a story of working with Buckminster Fuller, his ideas years ago about making the invisible visible. And that led to me and my quest looking for folks that were making a difference in the world just because they thought it was the right thing to do. And I learned that that's basically what positive deviance is, that we may not recognize that. And so I've been out searching who's out there, who the positive deviants, how are they affecting their organizations and the doingness in the world. So I'm looking forward to meeting you all and find out what your effect has been, and if you're noticing the positive deviance changing the future that we have coming at us. And Saskia.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Bobby. And hi, everyone. It is absolutely lovely to meet you. I'm beaming in from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I am an optimistic radical and a radical optimist, and also a radical collaborator. So I also always really love meeting like-minded people that are also there for collaboration and optimism about the future. And my optimism was really influenced a lot by a positive deviant that I met when I was about 18 and I was doing some volunteering in France. I'm originally from the Netherlands, and I volunteered at a multiple sclerosis clinic. And there was a lady, Lucienne, who was in the very last stages of her multiple sclerosis, but she was only 32. But she was and still is the most incredibly optimistic person that I met. And as an 18-year-old, when I was looking at the world then, which wasn't that rosy back in the Netherlands, there was also then an economic crisis starting, and you had the nuclear missiles that were happening, and there was all sorts of things happening. And seeing somebody who could have easily been down because of the situation she was in, she was the one that was cheering us up. And since then, I have had the optimism in my life, because I thought if she can, I can too, and we all can. So that's why I'm here. And I love, as part of my job, working in the wider, sustainability is a horrible word, but that's where I work in, both at educational level and corporate level. And to keep the optimism there is sometimes hard, but it is definitely what people need to see, the optimistic systems that are out there already. And it is not a removed future from us. And that's what we'd like to talk about today. So before we move into the more detail of it, we'd love to know a little bit about you, about who you are and where you're coming in from, and how you feel about the future. If you're okay to share, take yourself off mute and share, or put it in the chat if you like. So Peter, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure, Saskia, thank you. Yeah, from my part, I work on arts as a fulcrum in landscape scale regeneration projects. And how on earth I got to that is a confluence of performing arts, anthropology, and permaculture design. So for the last some years, I worked on a bunch of different public food forests in different parts of the world, and got roped into food resilience in the Christchurch rebuild at one point. And then have been based in the EU for the last while, cracking away at how do we plug in artists as, to borrow another of Bucky Fuller's terms, how do we apply them as trim tabs in some of these great regeneration projects that are going on steam today toward global targets. So it's a novel fulcrum, but an indelible piece of a wider solution.
Nice. Thank you, Peter. And thank you for helping at Christchurch. Can I ask, I might just call out to see if you're, if you're happy to talk, please do. And otherwise just put it in the chat or put your hand up. Jonathan, did you want to share how you feel, where you are from, and how you feel about the future?
Hi, Saskia. Thank you. Really interested in this session today. I do a lot of work on social movement learning. So I work with a number of movements here. I'm based in Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia in Canada. And so I've worked with some movements here resisting fracking, and also working with movements in South Africa and Ghana and in Guatemala. And really at the intersection of the multiple crises that we're facing. And the characteristic of all of these movements is that they are showing up, that they are not just simply rolling over and allowing these crises to kind of determine what the future is for them. And so sometimes that's resistance, sometimes that's presenting alternatives or prefigurative working at alternatives. So yeah, definitely interested in the conversation today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's really interesting. Dave, did you want to introduce yourself? If you're there.
Thanks, Saskia. Yeah, I kind of got forced into being more optimistic, I think, by getting tired of being so pessimistic. I mean, I've been working on sustainability and climate change for a while, and one, getting frustrated. It's like, even if you fix climate change, that wouldn't be enough. And two, just getting like, the whole approach was very naggy. It's like, you have to stop doing everything and quit doing anything. We're gonna fail. And we have to go back. And I was like, no, I want to choose a positive approach and see how that works. And so I don't have any guarantee that it will work, but I feel better about it. So got that going for me.
Thank you. Let's see if Theo, probably, do you want to introduce yourself? Or write in the chat? No, I don't think we can hear from Theo. Let's see if we have Suzanne. No. I'm not sure if anything is appearing in the chat either. No, well, let's go to Lakshmi. Did you want to introduce yourself, Lakshmi?
So I just want to mention, Anna, we don't have a chat option, or I'm not seeing it. So maybe that's not something that is.
So the chat is in Wova. So if you pull up Wova, then I know that the speakers joined through Zoom. So
Gotcha.
if you pull up Wova, then you'll be able to see the chat. And Lakshmi put something in the chat. It looks like she had surgery 2 days ago and she can't use her voice.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I can read it out. So she's going to share a little bit here. She says, I'm Lakshmi from Mexico City. I hope that I'm getting your name right. If I'm not, I'm so sorry. I work at UNAM in the National Laboratory for Sustainability Science. My main interest is in articulating diverse methodologies to explore and foster more relational and caring practices.
Nice,
Welcome.
thank you so much. And how about you, Anna? You're part of this as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Anna. I am from Transformations Community, the hosts of this event. I'm not like an environmentalist type person. I just don't know anything about it. I'm actually a grad student at CU Boulder studying user experience design. And that's kind of how I got into Transformations. I was applying for a work study, and they needed a person to design and develop their website. So I do all of that stuff. And it's been quite the ride. A lot of the stuff goes over my head, but I am learning, and I'm just learning a lot of really interesting things. And it's really great, honestly.
Nice, thank you so much. And how do you feel about the future, Anna?
That's a really good question. I guess I am optimistic. There are days where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? But I don't know. I'm always excited for the future. I feel like I think that it's like an exciting time. I look around sometimes whenever I'm feeling down about the world. I kind of look around and I'm just like, well, it can't get much worse than this, I'm sure. So there's only up from here.
Thank you. That's fantastic to hear. Thank you. And we just had Teresa joining. Hi, Teresa. Thank you for joining us. We were just going around the room and wondering if you wanted to introduce yourself, say where you're dialing in from and how you feel about the future.
Oh, putting me on the spot. It's okay.
Yeah, if you like to.
Sorry, it's okay. My name is Terry, or Teresa. I'm joining in from the UK. I'm doing my PhD on just transformation. So this is a topic
nice.
for me. So it is the same view on future, right? And so for me, I mean, future looks also depends future, what future of the art or my future? What kind of future are we talking about here? I need to be specific.
Your future.
Okay, so my future looks different every day in relation to different people, different things every day, right? So I could say I woke up today feeling, well, optimistic about maybe next week. So there's also like a time limit to my future. So I can't have dreams beyond 10 years, then I have realities that don't really speak to that dream. So it looks different every day, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing where you're from and how you are looking towards the future and why you're here in the session. So now we will go a little bit deeper into what positive deviance actually is and how we apply it and how we think you can contribute to it as well. So back to Bobby.
And I'll pick up, although I think Tio rejoined, so maybe we have him off mute, but if not, then I'll pick up. Tio, do you want to answer the same? Otherwise, I'll begin. Okay, I'll begin then. No worries. There's a negative. Yeah, all good. Thank you. I see the negative now. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today around this thread. I want us to be able to approach this at a couple of layers, right? One layer is we can think about positive deviance at the level of what it was historically over the last approximately half a century of practice in the social sciences, because there is a pre-existing field of positive deviance. And in that context, you might notice positive deviance in a ranking table that exists, for example, in the Washington State Institute for Public Policy Cost Effectiveness ranking of cost effectiveness of different approaches. And so historically, so it would be a social science of what are the, most effective case studies that we have performance records of. And it would be used with a bit of a scientific remove. And the positive deviance examples would all be in separate containers for research purposes. The positive deviant examples would not be in touch with each other, because then they, that would be against the scientific narrative of what positive deviance in the half century preceding us was, right? Then I'm gonna expand on that to say there's another layer of positive deviance, which we can get at if we take how I got to Solarpunk was through 2 or 3 positive deviant examples that I was studying because of our work in biophilia research and crowd doing context. And in that context, we saw the Bosco Verticale in Milan, these buildings that contain as many plants as Central Park in New York, as inspirational examples. And they seem to be exemplars of Solarpunk. And so Solarpunk became a fascinating portal because it became a narrative of what is the future that we most prefer across all dimensionalities of our preference, as imminent as it needs to be for it to be relevant, and as realistic as it needs for it to be credible to everyone, we would think. And so then once you dive into the Solarpunk world, I watched 400 documentaries in the Solarpunk genre. Most of them are positive deviance examples of realistic, inspirational things that exist somewhere on Earth, right? And so then you could say there's the storytelling of positive deviance, some told on an empirical basis and some told on a visceral basis. When I talk about the Balbotonic in the Solarpunk example there, that's a skyscraper that is a living tree constructed skyscraper of hundreds of trees that have been merged to form a single gigantic tree shaped into a building that's replaced the steel, concrete, and iron in Stuttgart. The fact that it exists is a proof of concept that that type of apex is possible. You can have you could have a building that is literally alive, not just a dead tree version of it. Same with the living bridge construction in Southeast Asia and South Asia. That's another positive deviance example that Solarpunk folks frequently refer to because it's an ancient one. Positive deviance can be modern, it can be ancient. What is positive deviance? It's really a form of sense making about the apex of what is possible. It's sense making in terms of that the fact that something was proven that it could exist because it does exist means that if we weave narratives of that into the future, it means that we could do so with imminence without, you know, needing 100 years to build something from scratch that doesn't exist because it already exists. In other words, it makes more imminent the timeline of what is possible, and it is an immersion for our hopes becoming more realistic. And because there's so many different dimensions of apex, there's apex in social justice, there's an apex of environmental biodiversity regeneration, there's apexes of what if people could work on what they love. So because there's so many different dimensions of apex, there's lots of kinds of positive deviance. There are positive deviance that give us an inspiration qualitatively because they've done something different, and there are positive deviances that we need to use empirically. But for both, these are the case studies that make us Solarpunkifiable because we are not underlyingly entangled with our cynical expectation of the future or dystopian expectation of the future. Rather, we have a ability to weave every example that we've cherished into a narrative of the future. So I think every person could say, here are all the positive deviant examples I've gotten to know deeply enough for them to be things I could storytell further. And then why does that mean that, you know, in the same way that people used to trade a list of what music they were listening to, you could say we are each sharing and gifting to one another the positive deviance examples that inspire us. When we gather with dear friends, if we are talking about the things that inspire us, we are sharing the positive deviance examples we've gotten to know with great depth or great difficulty because they matter to us and because they matter for our friends' ability to world weave a future that they can imagine into being. And I think that that is where positive deviance is so critical. Now, in our context, we've done a series of experiments with positive deviance. We could talk about that more, but the abbreviated version is we had AI generate a few hundred positive deviant examples with links and reference points that we then edited into a prototype of a universal library of positive deviance with humans quality controlling and reviewing it. We also experimented with having the AI identify whether some positive deviance examples could be connected to how Hollywood and the media storytelling and arts industry could change their portrayal of the future to reflect positive deviance examples. You know, if they could have product placement in films for commercial reasons, why can't they have positive deviance placement in films for purpose reasons? Why can't that be as endemic to culture as we need to nurture people who believe a future is possible that would rhyme and resonate with everything that their selves would become most alive through knowing are real and feasible and imminently possible together. So in that moment, I'm going to allow our co-hosts to also weave in as they would like, and then we can weave in the group more directly. But I think in general, the conclusion of what I'm sharing about positive deviance is it was a genre of academic research. It is now both a genre of academic research and a genre within a solarpunk world. And both kinds of positive deviance are real, and both kinds are usable any day in any context, at an individual level, at an institutional level, at a regional level. And so positive deviance can become something that changes how we design for the world. It can change how we build narrative for the world, and it can change our own identity in terms of when we deviate in positive ways, that being a source of our inspiration, rather than treating the outlierishness of it as something othering. It's something that is profoundly reclaiming of the positive deviance that we've come to cherish across global ancient and modern history. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mark, and then we'll weave in Saskia.
Thanks, Bobby. You know, I've got a number of things. You pulled on so many threads there. I love it. One is, I'm just going to acknowledge something. It sounds like, Peter, I heard you say something about being engaged in theater. You have a background in theater arts, yeah. And Bobby, I believe you do too, right? If I remember correctly. And I do as well. And there's something about being involved in theater where you get to create whatever it is that the play is about. And that may not be about reality, or maybe a perspective of reality that we want to change and look at differently. And that you get this blank stage, so to speak, to present that in. And to me, that feels very aligned with what we're talking about, is recognizing a future that we really want to live into, that story living that we're engaged in. And that to me feels like what recognizing positive deviance in this way that Bobby's suggesting provides a hopefulness that I think Saskia is attempting to, to show us, that there's an aspect to being optimistic. And so I know for myself that I'm living into a story that has very much to do with learning that Buckminster Fuller was somebody who gave of his life. He was about to commit suicide, and he said, wait, hold it up, I'm going to serve humanity and however I can. And everything in his life was to serve that. His birthday was yesterday, by the way. If he had been alive, we'd be celebrating with him. But he led me to meet another mentor who, through his actions and me engaging with him, set me on a journey to arrive here, looking for positive deviance of all things. And he brought over a South African theater troupe in the late 70s, 76, 77, that I was the tour manager for, where we had to sneak them in as students, but their play was about what it was like to live with apartheid in South Africa. And we toured that show, and these young men sat with the audience afterwards and just had a dialogue of what it's like to live with apartheid in South Africa. And soon thereafter, in the early 80s, we had divestiture from the university, and it helped, to bring awareness to another place in the planet where, just because Jim, my good friend, decided that he needed to somehow affect the change, and nobody paid him to do it. It was just out of the nature of what he felt, and from his heart, from the depths within. And I think that's what guides humanity. And we get lost on this path that we're supposed to fit in these little boxes that the culture has evolved to. And somewhere along the line, it doesn't feel right. We don't fit in there anymore. It doesn't contain the energy of our deep desires. And now we're finding ourselves with the technologies at hand and the ways to communicate and share, which is how this got me here, was wondering what would happen when humanity would realize the capabilities that we have to live in the noosphere, to share all of this commons of mind that is happening, not because there's heroes out there, and there's a lot of unsung heroes, but there's the essence of we need to do something different. And we need to do it just because we have to, something internal is telling us to recognize the power within. And so again, I just acknowledge that in each of you, because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that drive and desire within. And so again, I just want to recognize that and ask, how do you recognize that in others? And also in institutions, organizations that you're involved with, that drive and desire is there. I heard it's like, this is happening on a greater scale. I'm seeing it elsewhere. We're all vibing with it, but now what do we do with it? And that, I think, is what leads to what Bobby is presenting is, well, let's gather the examples. I know I learned from example. That's how I got here. That's how I led my life. so with this positive deviance library and gathering that information and those examples is what we've come to, that's kind of the ask is, introduce that concept and ask how you may be engaged with it. But I will turn that over to Saskia for carrying that forward.
Thank you so much, Mark. And yes, I obviously very much resonate with what Mark was just referring to, in that it is really around, whilst it is academic research, it does really sit with mindset, and a switch in mindset, in starting to look for indeed the positive approaches that are available, rather than the negative approaches that are often easier to think about, because that is what we hear. That is what we hear in the media. That is what we often hear around us. And to consciously switch mindsets to looking for the positive is incredibly powerful. And to me, this, when you start looking, you suddenly see that there is lots available. And I think that is the beauty of it. It is not in the future. They are here now, and often they are grassroots types of solutions that community groups that are working on solutions that are incredibly powerful if they were to scale up to larger opportunities. And really, as part of what we do in crowd doing, as Bobby referred to as well, we every second week we get about 60 people from around the world joining us to volunteer, and really each of them are looking for contributing to something good in a way that is different, maybe to just looking at the world without having that notion, with wanting to use skills, learn something new, and do something good at the same time. In itself, really, that can be seen as a positive view on the world. And I think one of the most well-known examples of positive deviance from ages ago, which if you Google positive deviance, it will probably come up, is the Save the Children example. But I think it is still a very, very good example to sort of go, this is the type of thing we're looking for. And if you haven't heard of it, it is very broadly said, it was looking at malnutrition in Vietnam, where in a community that was very much malnutritioned, but instead of the approach they took is actually looking at it in a positive way, as in looking in that community that was malnutrition, who were doing best, who were still feeding their children in the best way possible within that constraints. And through looking at that, they actually found out what were some of the positive differences that they applied, and started extracting that and amplifying that and distributing it amongst the rest of the community, and reduced malnutrition by just doing that with an enormous percentage in a very short amount of time. So it's a very different, it's a different type of mindset. Instead of going, oh my gosh, we can't, this is impossible, to actually go, no, the solution will be here. It will be within us. We just have to look at it slightly differently and trying to work with that. So it's a very empowering and energizing way of looking at current situations too. So it just needs people that, like you all here, that help people shift a little bit in that way. So I think we'd love to go around a little bit. So I do move back to Bobby.
I just wanted to add one small addenda, and then I'll hand back over to you to go around the circle. I totally support everything you're sharing. I just you reminded me of a couple of pieces when you shared that. Thank you so much, Saskia, and thank you so much, Mark. I just wanted to add that positive deviance doesn't have to be incremental. It can be transformational. And so we could talk about positive deviance examples that are not just a little better, but much, much, much better. And how do they get much, much better? Well, function stacking is one way to describe it. Saskia shared a book link with me recently who had an example in it, which was that they were taking a fictional example. Positive deviance can be fictional or fact. We had the AI generate dozens of fictional examples in each, well, in an example category or 2 or 3. And in the example of this book that was their positive deviance example, they identified a fictional city that created a food forest adjacent to every bus stop for grazing and socializing, and that they turned themselves into the city of 1,000 conversations convened outside of food forests by bus stops. And they had this whole mythology about that fiction, right? So we don't have to be limited by fact with it, but we do want to use both the facts that are positive deviance as well as inspirational fiction. And in that, I am going to now hand back over to Saskia. Thank you for letting me add that in.
Not a not a problem, Bobby. That was a really good addition. Did you also want to share the example of the Empathy Museum? I think that's also a really cool example.
Yeah, well, the Empathy Museum was in the Positive Deviance Library. That was a simulation of experience. In that case, walking another mile in someone's shoes, literally while listening to their voice, literally their shoes in this example. The other Positive Deviance example in the library of Positive Deviance, I can share very briefly the some of the toolkit that we created there, and then we can turn to the room, because I think that's important for us to also turn to the room. But here, I'm just going to share for a second here this. Let's see if this works. Let's see. Is that yeah, is that working?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is a spreadsheet version. We've got multiple documents that we've done around this, but this one identifies individual examples and why they're inspirational across agriculture and across energy, clean energy, regenerative energy, across architecture, creativity, across economic well-being, education, and there's a notion of these as 1,000 types of hopelessness. These are each antidotes to, because each prove a different thing is possible. But these are also, you could say, real human examples. The ones that aren't ancient, they have living humans attached to them, so we could collaborate with them. We can extend this because this is just a first few hundred of these, but the essence is that AI scraping the internet means that building a great library of positive deviance is more possible than ever before. Treating the positive deviance examples not in research isolation chambers like traditional social science would say, don't introduce the positive deviance to each other, or they might learn from each other, and that might destroy the scientific integrity of the separateness of the positive deviance. No, we're sort of more thinking of it in terms of how do all the positive deviants grow more positively deviant because they function stack more dimensions of what are extraordinary in discovering new design permutations for radical collaboration or for service learning or other dimensions. So anyways, we're interested in positive deviance in terms of accelerating global learning of social innovation design, of individual transformation and regional, bioregional transformation, and having that learning, culture, creativity, integration be something that positive deviance can be an engine of coalescence or a permissioning engine for us to imagine the future we need to feel like we have a future towards which we can be bound and towards which we want to steer spaceship Earth so that we can thrive as endemically as imaginably feasible. And positive deviance is how that becomes credible, imminent, realistically possible. So with that, let me hand over to Saskia's thread that was to include the rest of the room.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Like when you hear these examples, if you would imagine sitting around campfire with us and friends, what are sort of the positive deviant examples that come to your mind? Peter, I think you raised your hand. I'm not sure if that was to unmute yourself, but feel free to.
Yeah, thank you, Saskia, and all of you. Something that comes to mind right off the bat as one of our great, assets in this community of practice already is that we have a huge amount of methodologies to approach and sort of tactics and mechanics to deal with transformations socioecologically. But also we have a wonderful array of anecdotal experience to build on. And so, but something that strikes me is that we don't have, to my knowledge in this community, we don't have a ton of literacy in AI systems or machine learning. And so an infrastructure in this ecosystem that might be extremely helpful in the long run is to build out, whether it's the Positive Deviance toolkit or whether it's just another data set of examples, but a data set nonetheless that can be sort of fed into large language models in the future to continue understanding what are the parallels, what are the synergies between these interventions, but also just what do they look like? What's the shared experience or architecture of these interventions? And so the bringing forward that kind of technical imaginary might be extremely helpful.
I agree with you, Peter. One way that I could see that occurring, just to weave a 30-second simulation thereof, is you mentioned a city in New Zealand that you've spent time looking at the future of, right? And one could imagine that I could take 20 of these positive deviance examples from around the world and simulate a delegation to that city to bring those social innovations to that city, and then simulate dialogue among local stakeholders about whether those positive deviance examples from other parts of the world could work there, why or why not those could apply there, what localization, consideration, contextualization might be there. And I think that could lead to a really interesting simulated scenario for social innovation curation, positive deviance integration, local community integration of how transformation becomes feasible through positive deviance manifestation. So I'm in full solidarity to that intention, Peter.
I'm gonna I just because I know that there's others that are doing similar things, that building these libraries of good intentions and methodologies. And the Design Science Studio has a project, the Iris project, as well. And to me, it's how do we all do that together and share that? And that's the ultimate, like what feels like humanity is trying to figure out how to do. So, but it does, I've bore witness to this happening, and that it's been going on for a while. The recognition of it and the agility and the familiarity that there's others working on. So I have a good faith that it's weaving together. Anybody else would like to add to the conversation in any which way?
Jonathan, did you want to weave in?
Thanks. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, really interesting. I think that there's parts of this that resonate with other work that I'm familiar with around the Coady Institute and some of their asset-based community development stuff of kind of building on what communities have as opposed to, looking for what's missing. But I really like the way that you're framing it, and I like this idea of pulling together, a huge compendium or library of examples. I think that's always really, really helpful. Some of the work that I've been doing with these movements that I mentioned earlier around learning is about creating translocal ways of sharing. So with the idea that in sharing what people are confronting and how they're trying to overcome some of the challenges that they're facing, that they have maybe a tool or an experience that might be a key idea for one of the other movements, even though the crises and the challenges they're facing are different because of locality. So that's one of the ways maybe I'm working at this problem, but in a different kind of way, trying to create ways for folks who are at the front line of facing some of the crises that we are all in some ways facing, but maybe the most acute spaces are able to talk to each other and share their knowledge.
Saskia, do you want to weave on that part?
Yeah, I think yeah, obviously this all weaves together, and I really liked also what Mark said before, like the collaboration between the different great initiatives that are showing other ways forward is what can be so incredibly powerful if we can indeed, which is obviously what sits behind us trying to build a library of all those examples. And if we can, what Peter said, can link that to machine learning, AI, or whatever we want to do to scale it up and make it easier for people to access. So you know, a good UI designer like Anna could also help with with bringing a good, you know, front end to it, so that it becomes as easy as finding negative examples and stopping the feeds of disinformation with feeds of positive deviance information to people. I think bringing all the social movements together that Jonathan's referring to, and starting to really showcase that to shift our minds faster, because as Mark said, it is happening. We know it is happening. It's just not happening in the face of the narrative yet. As in, you have to look for it to find it, and it would be really good if this was the normal, right? If it was the new normal, that we see all this as part of what we do every day, which is what we are trying to get to. So hopefully we will be able to continue building on this conversation that we're having here in this room today. Terry, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Is there any sort of positive deviance ideas that come to mind for you when we're talking about this?
Yeah, so I have to say this is a very interesting conversation, because I don't think I've ever heard of the term itself, but as you kind of explained, I could probably relate to it somehow. So would it be fair to also say that somehow positive deviance can be, I don't want to say activism, but also what's the word I'm looking for? More like thinking outside the box. Is that fair enough to give it? Okay, I see. Okay. So I have not personally engaged in a project that speaks to that, but I can also see how it could relate to day-to-day or my day-to-day kind of like living choices or stuff like that, where you don't often do mainstream, if I would say. So you choose to go with something that does make sense, and eventually maybe it is useful to you, but also to other people in the end. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just really enjoying the conversations around how you guys are articulating this and how that could make sense. I guess maybe I had questions around, it seems like it relies so much on idiosyncratic ways of doing things, and which means a lot of times you're kind of swimming against the wave, right? And that can be difficult, right? So how do you then navigate? How do you then swim upstream? I guess maybe that's, yeah, if that makes sense. That's really my question. Like, how do you then swim upstream? Because I mean, you're not really walking with the people. You're often really choosing a different path that isn't really conventional, and that in itself is considered something different, something else, something negative in a lot of eyes. So how do you then walk that path of, just being a deviant, a positive deviant? Yeah, guess.
I love that question, and I do think that there's a sense in which positive deviance changes our relationship with time, our sense of the size of now changes, because our sense of what is imminently feasible changes with positive deviance, right? So, in other words, I can give you the ancient example of Delos as a city that had hundreds of language groups all living in the same city thousands of years ago, harmoniously for hundreds of years within the city in ancient Greece. And the fact that that was possible then makes it possible for that to also happen tomorrow in a city that we could imagine today. And it doesn't mean that we need extraordinary wait for it to happen, because thousands of years ago it already happened, and so it is already possible. So I'd say the positive deviance, you could put it in the broader family of big history methodologies for excavating a part of the path or reclamation of a part of the past. But there's other parts of big history that are trying to reclaim tragic history or reclaim traumatic history or reclaim those parts of history. I think the positive deviance part of big history is to reclaim the inspirational examples from history that could allow us to have a set of stars to navigate from in our design at each fractal level: individual, family, neighborhood, community, bioregion, Earth, right? And so I think that the upstream part of it can be that if a positive deviance example is wielded at the right moment, it can be a form of decision support by inspiration. Head towards that example, not that example. Head towards this lighthouse, not that. I saw Saskia nodding with vigor there, so let me see if she wanted to weave in, or if Mark wanted to also add, and we can weave.
Thank you, Bobby. I think that was a beautiful example to give, and it is indeed. I mean, just to acknowledge what Terry said, it is difficult, which it is. It's we are here in a bubble of people that are like-minded, but we also know that the bubble outside of us with people that are thinking in a very different way is still at the moment bigger than the positive deviance. But that is exactly why we are here and why you should be here, as in this is where you get your inspiration from and your resilience, and see this is why we want a library of all the fantastic examples that do exist but are not necessarily visible, so that you can take your inspiration of keeping going on that positive path from that by the like-minded people that you can see are there too. You are not alone in it, and that's very important to know, right? The building your connections so that you can turn towards the people that are in a similar mindset, the examples that are existing, that you can showcase to others that are the naysayers still, to sort of go, actually, no, there is another path. And keeping yourself energized through that. And it is, you're absolutely right, this is still needed. That's why I sort of said it would be so wonderful if it was the norm, but it isn't right now. So that is exactly why we're trying to make it the norm and trying to collect all those different positive examples that are out there and talk about it, because it is that's, I think, where you will find the way to keeping going upstream.
Terry, I just felt like when you were expressing it, I was like, oh, I felt that, I've lived that. It's like I take that personal. I resemble that remark, and that the notion of like, okay, how do I get out of the box and think out of the box, like I said, and you end up in the river. But then you end up in this little eddy that's kind of swirling off to the side, and you're like, and it feels terrible, but you're in a greater flow. And when you're intuitively in accord with that ideal of that you're chasing after, you're in the bigger flow, which is carrying us all. And I think that's, if you just remember that that's where we reside, and that's where the greatness from within comes, that you just sometimes you get stuck in these eddies, and you'll find your way out of them. And
I love that that part, and I think that one way to connect to that is, scientists would create maps of parts of the brain or neurotransmitters, etc. I think the way that we are thinking in positive deviance is it's a map of our resonance. It's a map of everything that resonates with us. How do we know if it resonates? We read an example, pretty quickly if it resonates. Now, you need the resonance of positive deviance, and you need the empirical positive deviance. You need outcomes that are achievable, and you need to have examples that combine enough dimensions to matter to you. But I do think that if positive deviance is a self-awareness monolith for us, then we can all metamorphosize at the speed of an imminent future that we need to reach in order to feel like we are thriving all the way between here and that point on the journey. Because if we do not have a future that matters to us to reach, the journey between here and there is not the kind of journey that makes us into the kind of future we know we can experience our way through the present to that future. Because positive deviance is, it's not armor like a medieval sense of armor, but it is protection against dystopian expression becoming things that we find to be fatalist, because it doesn't have to be our fate if we know that positive deviance is emancipation from mediocre magnetic manifestation of average expectation. Rather, we can create a breakout velocity through positive deviance for our imagination, because we have enough examples that did break through that we can imagine any challenge that has been intractable getting tamed, ceasing to be intractable, ceasing to be impossible. And I think that's what positive deviance is. It's an antidote to learned impossibility. It's an antidote to community scale learned helplessness. And it's an antidote to feeling like we can't fix towards a future that we feel like is fit for our future selves. It is endemically possible because we've witnessed every positive deviance example. And if you immerse yourself in hundreds of positive deviance examples, like those hundreds of Solarpunk documentaries and YouTube playlists that I've gone through, you feel like that world is extremely possible, right? It is not just tenuously, hypothetically possible. It is viscerally, visibly, and empirically possible. So we're getting towards the edge of time. I wanted to see if there's closing threads from Saskia and Mark.
Peter has something to say.
Peter, go ahead.
I'll be very quick, Bobby, but I just loved a bunch of points in that. One of them is the sense of armor. And to that, there's something Christiana Figueres always says about this, which is go with a strong back, but a soft front. And that confluence of, strength and resolve to accomplish the thing, but to do so in such a way that is caring and empathetic, and with a lot of deep listening along the way. And another piece of that is, I think there's just such a great confluence here, because between that, you can reach, there are so many ways that we learn as people and as we're inspired to get involved in things. There's feeling, thinking, doing, and then teaching it and giving it onward to others. And it's just, again, this is such a core piece of the equation of that, like being able to see the island that you're sailing to clear enough and to have it hit such a purpose in your being that it makes the journey worthwhile. It's going to be technically difficult. it's going to be socially and culturally hard. But if you have that, again, that shared belief, then it becomes all the more possible. So I think that's an essential arrow in our quiver going forward in this space.
Thank you, Peter. We are at time now, and we have to, and so I want to thank all the speakers and everyone for attending, but we have to wrap it up and just make sure that next session can get started.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely lovely being here with you all. Thanks, Anna, for the great facilitation too.
Thank you.
Of course.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.